a big welcome to you for today's session. So we have a range of charity employees here. Many of them are our own alumni. They're all specialists in their own areas, and they all have a wealth of info to share. So thank you to all of them for participating and for attending today. So just to say, our panelists today are Cara Treasure, who is a fundraising and communications manager at PumpAid, Carly Lies, learning and development manager at DePaul UK, Holly Walsh, who's deputy CEO at Healthy Me, Healthy Communities, Kat Pugh, campaigns and public affairs manager at Beat Eating Disorders, Nicola Jones, who is a health promotion specialist at Terence Higgins Trust, and Zoe Van Shaw, who's an integrated marketing executive at Oxfam. So they're all going to be speaking to you shortly. So what they're going to be providing you with is information and advice, really, and some historical, some narrative about their career path to date, their experiences of working in the sector and in their current role, and giving some advice on breaking into the sector, especially in what we all know is a very challenging landscape at the moment. They'll also be able to give you advice on making successful applications as well. So I'm delighted to introduce Cara to you, who is a fundraising and communications manager at PumpAid.
Thank you very much, Delia, and it's really lovely to be here today speaking with you all. So thank you very much for that opportunity, and hopefully this will help just provide kind of some guidance and maybe some ideas about kind of entering the sector, and then it will be great to have the Q&A afterwards as well. One thing is sometimes my internet connection is a bit funny, so I'm hoping that it's fine for the purposes of the Zoom, but apologies if it sounds a bit robotic at times. So as Delia said, so my name is Cara Treasure. I'm the fundraising and communications manager at PumpAid, which is a fantastic organisation doing WASH, so water sanitation and hygiene programmes in Malawi. So we do aid very differently, basically. So we really want to promote self-reliance, independence, and end that perpetual cycle of aid dependency. So it's a really fantastic organisation to be a part of, and it's great that so many organisations in the sector are kind of now doing things differently, and there's a big kind of shift, which is very exciting. So in terms of kind of career path, so I always loved geography at school, and so it was a kind of natural step to then go on to study that at university. So I did human geography and planning at Cardiff, and then I went on to do a master's at Manchester in poverty and development, because I recognised that I just wanted to keep learning and specialise even further and get as much knowledge as possible to then be able to try and, you know, make a difference in the sector. So following my master's, I did 2 internships at international development organisations, so at PumpAid and Farm Africa, and they were really brilliant at just giving me an insight into more, you know, what the sector is like, the kind of jigsaw of areas that make up an organisation, because so many different areas. I mean, and then after that, so between my kind of degree and masters, I spent some time at the British Red Cross. So after my internships, I then went back to the British Red Cross and worked in crisis response. So very operational roles, and did some really big kind of emergencies within the UK. So everything from small scale to the scales of things like Grenfell, Manchester, and London Bridge. So all of that response work, and that operational insight has definitely contributed to kind of everything that I've done since. I think any role that you have in the sector, you will develop skills which relate to another role as well, which is, you know, the fantastic thing about it. So I did crisis response and then some strategy work as well. So I developed the new recovery and resilience strategies after emergencies in the UK. So you have the initial response, but then it's crucial that people continue to be supported after that and obviously develop resilience. So I really enjoyed doing that. And then I went back to PumpAid. So a couple of years ago, I joined them as the fundraising and communications manager, which is a fantastic role because as it sounds, it kind of encompasses everything. So it's all elements of fundraising and communications. And because we're such a small organisation, it means there's so much scope for, you know, getting involved in lots of different things. So with fundraising, that will encompass everything from individual and major donors to trusts and foundations to corporates. So all days, will look slightly different, which keeps it really interesting. And we have a fantastic team over in Malawi, all local Malawians, and we get to work obviously really closely with them, and it's just brilliant to see the results of all of this work on the ground. So I've done a kind of range of things, but as I say, they really do, all of those skills that you develop will be useful for all roles going forward. And I think a really crucial one is the ability to work with people, and that will stand you in good stead for all roles within the sector. I think because most organisations, a role that you will work with people in other teams as well, and so it's just brilliant if you can develop those relationships. So in terms of kind of advice, I've just got a few notes here. So I think overall it's a fantastic sector to work in, and so it's really great that all of you are here on this call today. And I think if you're passionate about a certain issue or the charity sector, then absolutely go for it. It's really rewarding. The fact that you are working in order to have support an end beneficiary or service user or whoever it may be, but that's what you're working towards, and so it's extremely rewarding that that's the goal that you can keep in mind. Whatever role you have, it's for the benefit of being not for profit, so you're supporting people or whatever the focus of the organization is. And I'd say really crucially is to use university resources. So I know that Manchester has a huge database of all of these different resources that you can use, and it's so fantastic to use those whilst you're at university, and you can explore different things, have conversations with people, and find out about their paths as well. And I think that's another key thing with the sector is lots of people will have done things very differently. Some people might have gone down a very academic route, some people might have loads of work experience, other people might have done internships, other people may have done something completely differently and then moved into the charity sector. So I think, just speaking to people about that is really the best way to find out, what those paths can look like. And I think, tying into that, I think is using contacts and networks. So things like LinkedIn. I'd also really encourage you to do a kind of mapping exercise. So think about the skills that you have. If you do have particular areas of interest, then, tease those out. But it's also okay if you don't have a specific area and actually you're just kind of considering the charity sector, and because it's so broad, there's so many opportunities to get involved in all sorts of things, which is a really fantastic thing about it. And then with things like work experience, so I'm sure the others will also comment on the impact of COVID on programs, the ability to travel, remote working as well. And so if you are considering work experience or perhaps internships, there may be opportunities that are on a kind of remote basis, and so it's definitely worth looking into them. And for that, I'd really recommend looking at the websites like Charity Job and Bond, and there are other resources, as I mentioned, that I'm sure Manchester would also be able to list even more. So there's plenty of stuff out there. And then in terms of just general applications, I'm sure more on this may come up in the Q&A, I think a really crucial thing is to take your time. So when you do come across, a role that you're interested in or a particular area that you might be interested in, is really read the job description, the skills, criteria, and read it thoroughly and properly understand it, and then filter that into your application, because I think it really does come across from the perspective of someone who's read applications and done the interviewing. I think it's very clear when someone has taken the time to really read it through, making sure that they're talking about a time that they demonstrated that skill that's really important for the role, and demonstrate their passion for what they're actually applying for. And it's the same with interviews. I think, do lots of preparation, find out about the organisation, understand the role, and, you will go in and you will, as well as it coming across a lot confident. And I think with interviews, it's remembering it's a chance for you to shine and show, look what I can do, look what, I'd be fantastic for your organisation, and go in with that mindset. And also it's a chance for you to check, is it the right fit for you as well? So if you are, when we return to a world where perhaps there will be, a split with more office working and you know, all of those elements, you may actually go and it's your chance to think, okay, so how are the teams structured? What does the office look like? All of those things, as well as it being a check that you know, match the role, you'll be a good fit for the team. So it's going in with that confidence and, you know, keeping in your mind that this is something you're really passionate about. You've worked really hard for it. You've done your application. You will be amazing in the role, and go in with that mindset. And I think it will definitely really help. So sorry, that's a range of things, but I hope that's of use, and I'm sure the others will have, you know, plenty of things to kind of add to that. Hopefully they agree with everything that's been said. But yes, so I'll start there, and then obviously if there's any questions you have about you know, WASH, international development, charities, whatever it may be, then please ask.
Many thanks to you for that, Cara, and for keeping perfectly to time as well.
Oh, great.
That's always great. Okay, so moving on now to Carly. Carly is from DePaul, UK.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm from an organisation called DePaul UK. We are a youth homelessness charity. Set up in 1989 in London, and we work with homeless young people across the UK, and also internationally in a few countries in Eastern Europe and also in the US. We run a range of different services. Some of them are accommodation services for young people who can't stay in the family home for whatever reason. And also other services around family mediation, support with education, employment and training, counselling services, youth work services, and various other things. We're diversifying quite a lot at the moment. My role at the moment is the Learning and Development Manager, which means that I work to create all of the training and learning programs within the organisation. So things such as safeguarding training, equality, diversity and inclusion training, our leadership and management development programme, our induction programme for new staff. The learning side of things is not where I thought I would end up. I first wanted to get into charity work to work directly with clients, and that's been my background for the last sort of 15 years, and it's only in the last year that I've ended up in that role. So I went to the University of Manchester in, I think, 2002 to do my undergraduate degree, which was in politics and international relations, and in all honesty I didn't enjoy it. I felt a bit sort of different to the other people that were in my that I was on the course with. The university was very different back then. It was very sort of a bit stale, a bit sort of staid, particularly on the course that I was on. And while I did well at the course and I enjoyed the academic content, I didn't really enjoy the environment that I was in. So my first piece of advice would be, if you're in a situation at the moment where the course that you're on, you're thinking, I'm not sure if this is for me, I don't know if this is going to lead to where I want to go, stick it out, because once the course that you're on is not going to define you forever. So the best thing that you can do is just make the most of the opportunity that you have now, even if it's not exactly what you want to be doing or exactly where you think you're going to be going. There are so many opportunities once you graduate that you can diversify your skills and your experiences. So don't feel that if you're in a situation that isn't 100% right for you at the moment, then that's going to be the end of everything and you need to jack it all in, because you're going to have so many opportunities to grow and develop after it. After that, I went to do I had a job as a support worker for students with disabilities while I was at the university, and then after university I did that for a year, and then I decided to leave Manchester and go abroad and do some volunteering and some teaching. So I went and did some volunteering went and taught English in Italy for a while, went and did the same in India, did some other volunteering in different places, came back to the UK and volunteered on a few different projects here. And the reason that I volunteered was because I didn't really know. I knew that I wanted to work in the charity sector, but I didn't really know what sort of area I wanted to work in, which sort of clients that I wanted to work with. Did I want to work for an environmental charity? Did I want to work for a youth work charity? Did I want to work in international development? And I didn't know at that point. So I went and just volunteered and got experience in lots and lots of different areas. And through doing that, I then started to think about, okay, well, I don't particularly enjoy the teaching side of things, but I enjoyed teaching young people. So maybe young people, something that I needed to work on. And through being involved in lots of different voluntary opportunities, it gave me a clearer idea of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. So when I came back to the UK, I applied for a job as a support worker for children in residential care homes. Did that for a year. That was a huge learning experience, and through that I went on to do my master's in social work at the University of Manchester, which I absolutely loved. I did 2 fantastic placements with local voluntary sector organisations, the LGBT Foundation and 42nd Street, which is a young people's mental health charity in the Northern Quarter. And upon graduating from my master's, I got a job in the organisation that I work for now. Now, the job that I got at first in the organisation was very much an entry-level job. It was a plain old support worker job, working with young people in some of the accommodation services. When I was first applying for it, I thought, I feel like I'm a bit overqualified for this job. I'm a qualified social worker. Maybe I should be applying for qualified social worker jobs. This, you know, is a little bit low. You know, the skills that it needs are a little bit lower than what I can offer. But what really drew me to the role was the organisation. So my next piece of advice for you would be, when you're looking to make a move into your first roles after graduating, or if you're currently looking for part-time work now, rather than thinking about, okay, I need to find the absolute perfect job for me, the perfect place for my skills, and the perfect organisation, focus on finding an organisation where you are going to have opportunities to grow and develop. Because sometimes we pin our hopes on the perfect job and the perfect opportunity that perfectly matches our skills at a particular moment. And that could take you a long time to find. And it might mean that you overlook some opportunities that don't look as attractive in the beginning, but will actually enable you to go on and develop into bigger and better things. So by taking that entry-level job, I went into it, and within a year, I moved into a senior project worker position. And then after doing that for a year, I ended up becoming the manager of 2 of our accommodation services. So we've got one in Didsbury and one in Burnage. And there I was the manager of 12 staff, 25 young people in 2 sites. And that was an absolutely incredible role. I had a lot of creativity, but I was working directly with young people. And if I never would have ended up in that role. It was a fantastic, fantastic opportunity. But if I'd have, when I graduated, had looked to do something that perfectly matched my skills at that point, I never would have progressed so quickly to get to where I was, because I would have been too hung up on sort of, you know, getting something that was absolutely perfect in that moment. I probably would have overlooked the role that I started off in. So have an open mind, do your research about organisations. Do things like, you know, if you think, well, I think I'm going to be interested in working for an environmental charity, I think I might be interested in working with young people, I think I might be interested in working in homelessness services, addiction services, whatever it is, start to do a little bit of research about the organisations in that sector, follow them on their socials, follow them on LinkedIn, look at the things that are their priority and start to get a feel for their values. Because there's a big difference, as you'll find, between working for a really big charity, someone who's, you know, has a turnover of millions of pounds, and working for a really small, locally based charity that's a bit more grassroots. And different organisations fit better for different people. It depends on where you would like to progress to. If you want to be in a field where you can imagine developing and progressing quite quickly, travelling around a lot, you'd like the opportunity to possibly, you know, work for a bit in Manchester, work for a bit in London, work overseas. You might want to work for do a bit more in a bigger organisation. If you're staying in a particular city and you really want to work in a community grassroots sort of way, then look for organisations that are working in that sort of way in the place that you want to be. When you go to the application stage, that will give you such a big advantage if you have a little bit of knowledge about that organisation already, what their values are, what their funding streams are. When you are applying for jobs, as Cara said before, make sure it shows that, you know, you've done your research, that you know a little bit about that organisation. As someone who's done a lot of recruitment in my role, the big thing that I would say is know what's unique about you and don't be afraid to sell yourself. I think when you go into the charity sector, sometimes we can be very sort of, okay, I need to we can be a bit, I don't know, almost like a bit of a martyr. We don't want to oversell ourselves. We don't want to sort of like appear cheeky. We don't want to appear too sort of full of ourselves. But one of the most interesting things when you're recruiting people is hearing about people's unique life experiences and their unique skills. So when you're doing your applications, I can tell you there's nothing more boring as a recruiter when you're reading applications and people are just talking about, I did this course at university, you know, I did these modules, I got these grades. What's interesting is when people bring in those life experiences, if you've done something that isn't entirely relevant to the role, but proves that you have life experience in a particular area, bring it in. If you've overcome something, a form of adversity in your life, which proves that you have dedication, tenacity, you know, if you arrived in the country as a refugee, if you've been a carer, if you've been a parent, if you've had any experiences that make you who you are, don't be afraid to bring the authentic self that is you to your applications. I think particularly in the charity sector, it is a place where diversity is really valued. And while if you were going for a more corporate job, you might be sort of more keen to sort of present a more polished picture of yourself, in the charity and voluntary sector, what is really valued is honesty and authenticity from people that work there, and feeling that we have that human connection between staff and between colleagues. So don't be afraid to be who you are. Sell yourself as much as you can, but make sure that you are looking after your well-being as well, because in the voluntary sector and the charity sector, it can be a really, really difficult place to work. So make sure that you are building yourself up, looking after your mental health, and doing everything that you can to keep yourself safe, particularly in the current environment.
Carly, thank you very much for that. There were so many nods going on there from the other panelists. So thank you very much for that input.
Thank you.
Perfect, brilliant. Okay, so moving on now to, we have Holly here from Healthy Me, Healthy Communities. I forgot the last word then for a second. I was going to say lives.
That's okay.
Yeah, so Healthy Me, Healthy Communities.
Thank you, Delia. And I was nodding away there like that little Churchill dog that goes in the back of the car. Definitely agree with Cara and Carly's insights there. So I'm Holly. Wonderful to be here and see so many of you interested in this sector. I feel like interest in the sector has really grown during the times that we're in. So I graduated from Manchester in 2014 with LLB Law with Politics degree. I am from a widening participation background, and I found my way to Manchester and had the confidence to apply to Manchester University through the Pathways to Law programme, where I was mentored whilst I was at college, and that made a huge difference to me. I don't think without that I would have had quite the confidence to apply to a university like Manchester. And that experience and my experiences have left an imprint on me and have shaped my values, and I think shaped why I do what I do now. So really, I really connected then with what Carly was talking about. I enjoyed my course as well. I enjoyed the academic side of it, but struggled with the university experience. And I would certainly echo Carly's thoughts there around sticking with it and seeing it through, because of the transferable skills and the doors that your education will open when you come out the other end. So left university with a first-class law degree, but did not want to be a lawyer for a huge variety of reasons. I was really passionate about working with young people. I've done mentoring as a Pathways to Law mentor myself whilst at uni, and found myself then completed a PGCE, so I trained and qualified as a further education teacher. For a variety of reasons related to politics and all sorts of things, I didn't take up a teaching post after I qualified. I instead went and worked as a manager of a charity shop. It was a local job and I needed a job, and I volunteered for that charity for many years while studying. So I found myself suddenly, after teacher training, managing 40 volunteers on a 7-day-a-week running store, managing all the health and safety, all the finance, all of the stock. And it was quite surprising. Charity shops are very complex environments. There's a lot going on and there's a lot to look after. So to say I cut my teeth there would be an understatement, but I'll always be grateful for that experience because I learned so much about charities, about volunteers, about funding, about fundraising. But I got to a stage where I felt I couldn't really push any further. There wasn't a lot of room for promotion and growth and development. So then I went and worked at a youth charity, and I was delivering mentoring programmes to vulnerable and at-risk children in schools in Manchester. Loved that. Never a dull day at all. It was wonderful. And at the same time, I went and did my Masters in Educational Leadership to really back up what I was doing in practice. I wanted to learn more about the theory behind it. Graduated from that at Chester University. And as I'm doing that, I'm really looking forward and trying to develop my skill set. I was doing a very operational role at the time. I wanted to develop my strategic knowledge and understanding of the bigger picture and how things work at that level. So I was fortunate enough to gain a role on a charity board. So that was being a trustee for a children's charity, £3 million turnover children's charity based in Manchester, and learned an awful lot there. I did 3 years there, and whilst I was there, gained spaces onto other charity boards as well. Homelessness charity based in Yorkshire, and a charity that supports adults with disabilities based in Stockport, my hometown. I then progressed on to become a senior manager working in homelessness, which is fantastic. I manage multiple services, community services, a store, a social enterprise arm of the organisation, and supported accommodation as well for adults. And that was brilliant. Again, never a dull day, and learned so much about people, what makes people tick. And I found myself Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Healthy Communities, and we are a not-for-profit social enterprise based in Manchester. We've grown from the grassroots, we've grown from the ground upwards. We're a small organisation, but I do like to think we pack a punch and we have significant impacts in the work that we do. And we're focused on tackling health inequalities and the aspects of life which contribute to those poor health outcomes. So it's getting right to the heart of how people's health is negatively impacted by, for example, living in a more disadvantaged neighbourhood, not having access to certain opportunities, perhaps struggling to find work or find stable work, and how that impacts on people's health. So we're a real community development organisation. And I've just started a part-time PhD in politics as well, so plenty going on. In my substantive post, I'm responsible for health and safety, HR, safeguarding, learning and development, and monitoring and evaluation. I head up those functions of the organisation. In terms of advice for this sector, my biggest piece of advice would be to say it's so important to know yourself to break into this sector and to survive in this sector. Your first relationship is always with yourself. You are your greatest asset. You are your greatest asset. And you have to own every part of yourself. The brilliant bits, what you want to shout about, but also the sort of less brilliant, awkward bits that will just sweep under the carpet. But you've got to own them because it's you. It's what makes up you, and nobody else is like you. You are unique. And very much touching on what Carly's talked about there about selling yourself and being proud of who you are. Absolutely, because it is you, your skills, your character, your experience, what will help you to navigate the world of working in charities, because it is not easy. Working in charities and not-for-profit is difficult at times. It's challenging. I wouldn't leave. I think I'll always be in this sector because it is so rewarding. The joy is so joyous. the highs are so high, but my goodness, when it's cold, when it's cold and windy and you're in a freezing cold community centre somewhere and there's not enough money to put the heating on, that's a challenge. You'll find that in our sector, resources can be very challenged, resources can be very limited, funding, having specialist knowledge as well can be a real challenge for this sector. So it's knowing yourself and what really makes you tick. I keep an open mind. Be open to absolutely everything, because you'll find that in this sector, roles and organisations will evolve and change very, very quickly. So as the government's priorities change, as people's needs and wants change, and as the funding structures change, depending on who's in Parliament, what the flavour of the month is, so on and so forth, it will change so rapidly. And organisations have to adjust the sails. You can't change the direction of the wind or the speed of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And organisations in this sector have to pivot and change and transform, and you want to be part of that. And that's where the opportunities and the joy and the excitement and the learning and the growth comes from. So number one, know yourself, know what makes you tick. You've got to understand your own values, because it'll be those values and those commitments and that vision and that passion what gets you through the difficult times. Be flexible, be open, echoing what Carly said, just because the role doesn't seem to perfectly fit your ideal vision of what your ideal job would be, go for it anyway. There is no such thing as a perfect job. Jobs in this sector, because of funding constraints, resourcing constraints, are often a mishmash of lots of different things. Unlike the corporate world, where you may have person A is a specialist in this, person B is a specialist in that, person C is a specialist in that. In our world, much like my role, you're wearing 10 different hats in one role, and you've got to do and be a little bit of everything in one. And that's where the growth and the enjoyment and the learning and the excitement comes from. And that means there's no such thing as a perfect role, because it'll be bits of all different things, and it'll grow and develop as time goes on and as the world around us changes. I would say this sector is more impacted than any other by the changing world around us, whether that's the environment, whether that's politics, whether that's people, supply chains, how much money people have got in their back pocket, how the nation feels. We really feel and absorb that and are changed by that. That's part of the joy. So it's learning to navigate that space. In a more practical, down-to-earth sense, in case none of that makes any sense whatsoever, and I sound like the aliens have just dropped me off from some other planet, very much echoing what Cara's talked about in terms of applications. I've done a lot of recruiting, and in my job, I write the job descriptions. So when an organisation is advertising for a job, we haven't just made it up. We're not doing it for fun. We wrote that job description because we recognise we need a person, brilliant person, to do X, Y, Z and whatever else. We've got that need within the organisation to fulfil. And our job descriptions are wrote on the basis of what that need is, or what the journey ahead looks like. We want to develop such and such a service. Oh, we really need these skill sets. We're missing these skill sets. Let's go out and recruit for somebody who's got them. Always, always, always read the job description. It's not difficult. We don't write them for fun. They are absolutely true to what we are looking for. Read the job description. Read it again. Read it again. Read it again. Highlight it. Read it again. Highlight it some more. You've got to really soak that job description in. They're not tricks. There's no trick things in them. They are what we are looking for. And when you are writing your application, or you are, you're updating your CV and a cover letter to apply, mirror your application to that job description and make it as clear as possible to the recruiter where you have got those skills. Job applications are not puzzles, they're not anagrams, they're not jigsaws for a Sunday afternoon. They serve a purpose. The purpose is to get you an interview. The purpose of a job application is for you to shine bright enough to the panel, the recruitment panel, for you to get an interview, to get your foot in the door so that they can meet you and learn more about you. Please, 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 please write your application or your CV and cover letter in the clearest possible way. What do I mean by that? Right. Point 1 on the essential criteria of such and such a job is ability to work with diverse groups of people from all backgrounds. That's one you'll often see. So on your job application or in your CV, I want to see in bold, be brave, in bold, as a I worked with people from diverse groups of people from lots of different backgrounds. When I was and put it in bold, you wouldn't believe the absolute joy I experienced when people have put together a job application in that format. It makes such a huge difference. Yeah, so that's my words of wisdom, to make it as clear as possible. I don't know if my LinkedIn details are floating around here anywhere, but I'm happy for people to contact me on LinkedIn if any of that has been useful. And that's me.
Many thanks, Holly, for that very zealous communication there. Thank you ever so much for that. Okay, so I'd like to introduce next to Kat Pugh, who is the Campaign and Public Affairs Manager at Beat Eating Disorders. So over to you, Kat. Thank you.
Hi, I just also just want to follow on from what Holly was saying about job descriptions and applications, actually, and just to say I completely agree with Holly about that point. And just to kind of add, and I'll talk a little bit more about my advice at the end of my section, but just to really add on that, also read the instructions with our applications. There's some very specific instructions that we ask people to do when applying for our jobs, about how to fill in the application forms, and you would be amazed how many people really do not follow those instructions. So really kind of read what you're being asked to do when you're applying for that job, because otherwise it might end up in the bin, even if you've got all of the experience. So a bit about me. I'm the Campaigns and Public Affairs Manager at Beat. Beat is the UK's eating disorder charity. I've been with Beat amazingly since December 2016, so it's just absolutely flown by. It's by far the best job I've ever had, although my job at university as a student ambassador comes a very close second, because I love that job there as well. But I really love working at Beat. It has a wonderful variety to the different types of work that I do. I head up a small team of someone who's a policy advisor, someone who is a campaigns and engagement officer, so that would be someone who might be involved in writing petitions, contacting people who are interested in campaigning, and then someone who's a campaigns and public affairs officer. So they might go out and meet with MPs where I can't, and they also sort of support me in the campaigns management. And then I also work with some of the people who run our campaigns in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as well, although don't manage them directly. As I said, we're a small team, but we do achieve a lot. We have to work with decision makers, as I said, across all 4 nations, and that will range from MPs here in England, but also members of Scottish Parliament, members of the Legislative Assembly in Northern Ireland, and members of the Senate in Wales. But we'll also meet with other decision makers across the NHS, and also with medical schools as well, depending on what types of campaigns that we're running. Every day is different. I have HR work that's involved in my job as well. And as I said, it's incredibly varied. But when I left university, and when I was even thinking about going into the charity sector, which stems well before going to university, I have to say, I would never have seen myself doing this job. I wouldn't have even known that this job existed. And it certainly wasn't a sector that I'd even considered going into in terms of the actual specific sector of mental health. I think I would very much say I had my heart set on international development. I'd always wanted to work in the charity sector. I think my passion for the charity sector probably even went back to when I was 9 at school and getting involved in a fundraising event. I sort of gone and approached my head teacher after seeing a Blue Peter appeal on TV and said, can we do this at school? So I think my passion very much sort of ran very, very early on. But I'd always wanted to kind of go into the charity sector. When I turned 18, I took a gap year, went off and volunteered out in Ghana, and I think that really kind of sort of sowed the seeds for what I was going to do in the future. That I wanted to go into international development, and it was just I actually got to the point that I nearly changed my course at Manchester from a music degree to politics and international development, but for the fact I didn't have the grades, and I had my heart set on going to Manchester, so I ended up sticking with the music degree, and I think that was a really good thing in the end, because it actually freed up more of my time to do voluntary work and other things as well at uni. So I think it was probably a blessing in disguise. But I graduated from Manchester in 2011. So I was here for 3 lovely years, as I said, studying music. But during my time, like a few people have mentioned already, I was able to maximise my spare time, taking part in various voluntary things, including through Manchester RAG, and actually went out to Zambia. So I got the bug of volunteering overseas, and also in my final year, probably quite ambitiously, decided to take on a project managing an organisation called Read International, where we collected something in the region of 50,000 books and fundraised, I think, like £8,000 to get them shipped out to Tanzania. So that was a pretty big undertaking, but it's always a great experience that I even mentioned on my interview that got me this job that I have now, because I think it's something that people are always very impressed about, the time management skills that were involved, and also just generally the life experiences that I had, again, when I was out in Tanzania with that one. So as I said, some of your experiences at university that you have will serve a purpose even well into your later career. I realized very quickly on that I didn't have kind of the experiences that I needed in order to kind of get me that first job that I wanted. The big thing that was lacking was experiences in politics, and so I was lucky that I was still able to live at home, and home was London for me. So I was able to benefit from getting some unpaid internships at the time, which I know that's obviously a difficult thing now, but back then it was something that I was able to benefit from, including one in the House of Lords, with the Department for International Development spokesperson, and that was a real eye-opener for me about the workings of Parliament, and also I was able to sit in on some really interesting meetings, which I might not otherwise have done, and gained some really, really valuable experience from that. And I have to say, got the bug for politics. I think that was something that was of real interest to me. I then got my first job, probably not directly from that, but I think my experiences at university were probably the main thing that helped me get my first job. But my first job was as a youth development officer, heading up the youth development programme for the Liberal Democrats. And this was while they were in coalition government. So again, that was a really valuable experience for me. I'll definitely say it was a learning curve. Anyone that's kind of had anything to do with youth politics will know that it's not an easy thing to kind of manage people who are in youth politics. And I think probably the biggest learning curve was 6 months into my role. The youth executive decided to fire their chair, and so a bit of a coup d'etat there. and I think I took it rather personally. And so again, that was certainly very challenging for me. But again, it was one of those jobs that was very diverse, and I was able to kind of get experience in campaigning, able to get experience in events planning, and also understanding of policy as well as managing volunteers. Sadly, the funding for my role was cut, sort of about a year and a half, I think, into the job. So they had a restructure, which I think, as Holly was saying, is very common in, I mean, I know this wasn't the charity sector specifically, this is politics, but it's very, very common in the charity sector to have restructures. And I took the option to not go for an internal job that was coming up, but to take the money that I was getting through redundancy. In hindsight, I think that's probably the wrong decision, but you live and learn, and I sort of panicked applied for jobs, which is definitely something I would advise against. Rather, I was doing the kind of thing, all of the advice that we're kind of giving not to do, and kind of literally sending my CV to every single organisation. But I did end up getting a job at Save the Children as a kind of very sort of entry-level administrative role. I think for me, it probably didn't suit me, and I definitely kind of, it was definitely kind of one of those roles that it was like, I'm going to take it because I've got nothing else lined up. I think I found working in a large organisation like that certainly didn't suit me. And I won't sort of say too much really, but I think my experiences there made me kind of reevaluate kind of what I was doing, and I sort of decided to kind of move on without a job to go to after 5 months. So yeah, nevertheless, I learned a lot from those experiences, and I was very lucky that another job came up not long after. And I have to say that's probably the best thing that happened. I learned so much about myself, and again, I think it was Holly that was saying about knowing yourself. I learned so much about management from the person that managed me there, because she was just such a wonderful person, brought a lot of confidence out from me. And I think, again, that's something that's really important. I think if the job's not right, don't be afraid to move on. I know that's quite difficult to give this advice now when there's limited jobs out there, but you're in work more than you aren't in work over your lifetime. And if you are really unhappy in a place, then sometimes it is just important to kind of take the plunge and move on. I realise I'm sort of rambling on a little bit, so I'm going to try and be a bit more succinct about this. Yeah, I just seen the message from Delia preempting that. So I think how did I get from where I was to kind of where I am? I did a master's, and I wanted to kind of my kind of own life experience as well I had a bit of experience of mental health myself, and I think the two combined led me in the direction of where I am today. So I think those were kind of two really important factors, and the job just came up. My current job came up at the most important time, at a crucial time. So it just sort of worked out perfectly. But anyway, I'm where I am today, and I'm, as I said, sometimes things are meant to be. I just want to kind of finally sort of wrap up with some key pointers, which have come from what I have learnt from my experiences along the way. My first bit of advice I obviously gave at the beginning, so make sure you read the applications. My second thing to say is that feedback is a gift. Obviously there will be some managers that are not that great, but hopefully the majority of managers are really good, and so if they're giving you feedback about how to develop, then that feedback, take that on board and look and see how you can improve, because that's only there to kind of help you going forward. So think about feedback being a gift, and use that to kind of develop yourself, and don't be afraid of critical feedback. And then finally, I would say don't don't be afraid, as I said, to kind of if it's not working out for you, don't be afraid to kind of have that conversation about how things could be done differently, or even look for alternatives. It doesn't matter if you've only been in a place for 3 months. If you're not happy, you know, life's more important.
On that note, thank you for that, Kat. I like that final phrase there. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for that. Okay, so moving on now to Nicola, who is a health promotion specialist at the Terence Higgins Trust.
Yeah, so I work at the Terence Higgins Trust, and for those of you who don't know, it's the leading HIV and sexual health charity in the UK. The kind of overarching goals for the Terence Higgins Trust are to end HIV transmissions in the UK, support and empower people living with HIV, end stigma and discrimination surrounding HIV, and then also to enable everyone to have good sexual health. So my role, there's kind of 2 parts to my job. So I'm a health promotion specialist, and under that role I do one-to-one work with young people who are at risk of unhealthy relationships or at risk of poor sexual health. So young people who might be at risk of child sexual exploitation, or they're affected by low self-esteem, low body image, or, you know, involved in unhealthy relationships. So I do programs with them on a one-to-one basis. I also do professionals, so train professionals who work with young people on how to negotiate conversations around sex and relationships with young people, and how to start those conversations and how to kind of spot the risks of whether someone is exposed to child sexual exploitation. And then the other part of my project is I'm also a project manager for a project called Breaking Barriers. So one of the things that I noticed about sexual health is a lot of the campaigns and a lot of the health promotion stuff is focused on changing behaviours. And actually, as Holly was mentioning in her role, there are lots of barriers that prevent people from accessing health services. It's not always about behaviour. So in combination with an organisation called African Families in the UK, we are jointly managing a project called Breaking Barriers, which is looking at the specific barriers that Black, African and Caribbean women in the UK face when they're accessing sexual health services and removing some of those barriers. So we look at things like cultural representations in sexual health campaigns, language services in health systems and things like that. And we're kind of working to remove some of those barriers and reduce the HIV rates among those populations, because the data does show that HIV affects certain groups in the UK disproportionately, and a lot of that reason is around access to education and access to services. So that's broadly what my main job involves. I'm also just finishing off a PhD part-time, so it's a bit of a mixed bunch, and kind of representative of my career path really, which certainly hasn't gone in a straight line. So I graduated in 2009 from the Lancaster University with a degree in psychology, and originally I wanted to work in the prison service.